Okay, this is 2.03 and it's question number 1. It is a multiple choice, but I don't have the rest of it here. Okay, so when you're doing an absolute value, all right, you want to know the difference between an absolute value and a parentheses. Parentheses you can distribute things through. Absolute value bars you cannot. In fact, you can't solve any absolute value bars until everything else on this side of the equation is moved to the other side. So in this case, this -4 needs to move over here before we can break out of these bars. So let's start with that. We always say, how are we attached to the bars? We're attached by a minus sign. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add 4 on both sides. So let's start with that. If we add 4 to both sides, okay, and then draw a line, we're going to get our absolute value bars, 2x plus 6. The 4's cancel out, and we're ending up with 20 plus 4, which is 24. Now, the next thing we do is we say, oh, well, the absolute value bars are all by themselves over here, which is great. So it's time to break it out. But before you can break it out, look at this number. If this number is a negative, there's no solution. You can't do anything. It's allowed to be 0 and it's allowed to be positive, but it cannot be negative. That's going to be the rule here. All right, so it's positive number. So it's time to break it out. So what I do is I go ahead and start with 2 equations. Make it go this way and this way. You just take this stuff that's in here and put it to the left of the equation. 2x plus 6 equals. Same thing over here. 2x plus 6 equals. Okay, and then you take this number and you make it positive and you make it negative. And then you just solve for both of them. So let's go ahead to the left now. We've got 2x plus 6 equals 24. If we're solving for x, we need to move the 6 and the 2 to the other side of the equation. 6 is attached to x by addition, so we're going to subtract it from both sides. All right, so now we have 2x equals 24 minus 6. Well, 24 minus 6 I think is 18. Okay, because 14 minus 6 is 8. Yep. Okay, now x is attached to 2 by multiplication because there's no sign there, so we're going to divide on both sides. So x equals 18 divided by 2, which is 9. So we get one answer so far. We're going to go to this side now and do the same thing. All right, 6 is attached to x by addition, so let's move it by subtraction. Oops, this is supposed to be a 6. That's a 6. Okay. All right, so we have 2x equals, this is negative 24 minus 6. Negative 24 minus 6. So when it's the same sign, you add them and take that sign. So 24 and 6 is 30. So this is a negative 30. All right, 2 is attached to x by multiplication. So we're going to move it by division. And we get x equals negative 30 divided by 2, which is negative 15. So there's my second answer. Okay, so let's go back through this again. What we did was we started out with our absolute values. Okay, we need to break out of the bars, so we move the 4 to the other side. Once the bars are all by themselves, we examine this number, make sure it's not negative. If it's 0 or positive, we can break it into 2 equations. We take the 2x plus 6 and we make this equal to positive 24 and then negative 24, and then you just solve for both. And that's it, and that's how you get this answer. Okay, now we're going to go to 2.03 number 2. If you look here, it's the same kind of deal. You've got something that's attached to your absolute bars, absolute value bars, so we can't break out into 2 equations yet. So the very first thing you're going to do is need to move this negative 5. So we always say, well, how's it attached? Negative 5 is attached to this by multiplication, so we're going to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division on both sides. Oops, so we're going to divide by negative 5 on both sides. Okay, so these cancel out, and now you're with an absolute value of x plus 1 equals 10 divided by negative 5, which is negative 2. Okay, so our absolute value bars are ready to go. Now it's time to break into 2 equations. The first thing we're going to do, this is out. The first thing we're going to do is examine this number. Remember, if this number is negative, you cannot do it. You can't break it out. And in this case, it is negative. So there is no solution to this question at all, no solution. Okay, now again, when you're looking at it, the very first thing you do is you can't examine that until the bars are all by themselves. So I couldn't tell that with the negative 5 in front here. So once I moved everything over to the right and my bars are by themselves, then I examine this number. If it's negative, no solution. Okay, now we're on number 3. And now they start to make it a word problem. But the good part is when I'm looking at this automatically, even without looking at the words right now, I very much want to solve for X. I very much want to move the 15, move the 3, break out of the bars and solve. That's my first thing I want to know. Okay, now it's saying the minimum and maximum temperature for a day in Cupcake Town can be modeled by this equation. What are the minimum and maximum temperatures? So remember when we're finding absolute value, okay, it's always, if you notice, most of the time we're getting 2 points. It's not always, but basically it's like this. You get a point, and it's either this many units, say it's a 5 this way, and then it's 5 this way. So, for instance, if this costs $10, whatever, if this dot costs $10, it could be as high as $15, or it could be as low as $5. Okay, so that's the idea of an absolute value. So it kind of is a distance on one side of the point and then a distance on the other side of the point. So if we're trying to find the minimum, we're going to be trying to find this point over here. So let's solve. Okay, here we go. We have our 3x minus 8. Okay, plus 15 equals 18. We're going to have to move things away. Remember, we have addition and we have multiplication. So you always move the addition first. This is attached by addition, so go minus 15 on both sides. Okay, all right, this is gone. Now you're left with a 3. You're looking at an absolute value, okay, and equals 18 minus 15. And 18 minus 15 is 3. All right, absolute values are still stuck with this 3. There's no sign between here, so this is a multiplication. So divide both sides by 3. Okay, and the 3 cancels out. Now I'm left with an absolute value bar. And on this side, I have 3 divided by 3, which is 1. All right, let's see if we can break out. To break out, you have to look at that number and say, hey, is this a negative number? If it's a negative number, I can't break out. But if it's a positive number or 0, I can. This is a positive number, so we're good to break it out. Let's do the first one. So it's x minus 8 equals 1, and then the other one would be x minus 8 equals negative 1. Okay, so the stuff in here, it just stays the same. The number that changes is the 1 and negative 1. Okay, we have a negative 8 attached to x. So to solve, add 8 on both sides. And x equals 1 plus 8, which is 9. So that's one number. Now let's go to the next one. We're going to add 8 to both sides. X equals negative 1 plus 8. Negative 1 plus 8 is the same thing as 8 minus 1. So 8 minus 1 is 7. Okay, so basically, you've got this point sitting here, okay? And on one side of it, you've got the number 9, and the other side of it, you got the number 7. All right, well, they say, what are the minimum and maximum temperatures for the day? The minimum is going to be 7. This is your min. And your maximum is going to be 9. And that's that. Okay, here's another question. This is number 4. And looking at this, we've got the same kind of deal here. We need to get our absolute value all by itself. And then once it's by itself, we can evaluate this. So we need to move this 16 to the other side. So this is a plus 16, so we're going to minus 16 on both sides. Okay, so we have our absolute value is x plus 2. And on the right-hand side, we have 14 minus 16. 14 minus 16 is negative 2. Okay, now we got to see if we can break out of the bars into two equations. To break out of these bars, we look at this number. If this number is negative, we cannot do it. Well, looking at this number, it's negative, so there is no solution. That's it, no solution. And that is all the questions I can see on your 2.03 that were incorrect. I hope it helps. All right, thanks a lot.